Okay, so welcome to our next project. I'm Mitch here at Chigamik, and we're going to be working through dangly earrings. Okay, so I've got my little template here that I'm going to show you. So it's going to be a very simple design, like this, if I can get it to be out of the light. So you can see it's a sort of a triangle that's split into three aspects. Okay, so we're going to be doing three colors here, a tri-colored earring. Okay, um, our three colors and how they're going to lay out, just so you can visualize this in your mind. These outside two triangles here, the outside two, are going to be this olivey kind of green color. The inside triangle that runs down the center is going to be this kind of light, dusty kind of pink color. And finally, the edging of this, we're going to edge it all the way around. Once it's, beaded flat, we'll finish it with an edging in this kind of sky blue, right? So the thought with this, it's springtime. This is for spring programming. So we're going to have green on either side with this little pink emerging, showing that new, like, bright, light, fresh colors of spring blooms, right? And then it'll be surrounded in the edgework of this blue, which is going to be the nice blue sunny skies that you get when spring comes around. So that's what it's going to kind of emulate. It's going to be interpretive. It's not going to look like a flower, but it's going to give you that idea, right, of that bright, nice pink color coming out between the green with that blue edgework, right? So they're going to be bright, they're going to be a little bit flashy, and they're going to be springy, right? They're going to be a nice alive kind of colors on these. So that's the three colors that are going to be in this piece, okay? So otherwise in your kit, you should have things like 2 needles, right? These are size 10 extra long beading needles, or English needles, they call them as well. You're going to have a big enough piece of fabric stabilizer to do both your earrings, obviously. Yeah, you'll have 2 templates too. Obviously, you need 2 of them for your 2 earrings. You're going to have a big enough piece of leather, right? This is super, super soft deer hide. This is going to be, a big enough piece to do both, again, of your earrings. You'll get, of course, those 3 colors of, you get those 3 colors of beads. Then you're also going to get your hardware, right? Which is going to be to actually hang them, right? Obviously, to make them earrings. The things that you won't have are scissors, right? We assume most people probably have scissors at home, and you don't need fancy ones for this. Glue, you can use like a super glue for one aspect where you're putting the 2 pieces together, your stabilizer and your leather. But then when you're just putting your template onto your stabilizer, onto your white fabric here, right? You can just literally use a glue stick or something, just something that keeps it in place. That's all you need, nothing fancy there. And then the last thing is thread, which of course is floss, right? So anyone who's beaded with me before knows that I use dental floss, which is an old trick of the trade. And the deal is, it's, comes in a handy dandy dispenser. It's super cheap. Everyone has it at home. And it's very, very strong, right? It's the right diameter, which is great. And then it's already pre-waxed. So most people go out and wax their beading thread so that it becomes a little stickier, so that it holds the beads in place, makes a firmer piece. We've already got that set up with our trusty old dental floss. Just make sure you get this stuff. This is a butler weave style dental floss. Get something like that. You don't want that thin, flat, like dental ribbon stuff. Like, that's not what you want. You want like the good old fashioned, like, woven dental floss, right? That's the stuff. Otherwise, that's everything in the kit. That's the project. Follow me as we go through it. I'm, again, make these templates as I go, and just, you're watching me bead them fresh. So you'll see me kind of figure it out as I go through in the process. The first one of the earrings is always, a bit rougher than the second one. The second earring you do is always mint. So the first one's the dummy round, then there's always the nicer one, which you make second. So yeah, follow me as I work through this. I'll just go through all the different clips and just follow along all the different steps. Something that I'm going to say too is always watch a little bit ahead, because oftentimes you'll see in the next clip, in the next section, when I do my next step, I'll be like, oh yeah, 2020 hindsight, I should have done this. So if you're going to do it, make sure you do this little tip, right? So always watch just a bit ahead of where you need to go, because I'll often have little bits of insight that I learn as I do the piece, right? So that's the scoop. So stay tuned for your beading technique, and we'll start working through this, and you'll see it'll come together real fast. They're not very big, right? So that's it. Okay, so next, I guess really our first step is I've cut out my little template. You want to leave the black line though on the outside. You don't want to take that line, because that's the line that you're going to follow beading. So it's nice to be able to see it, right? So leave that little black line. Also, it'd be too small if you take the line. So make sure that line is still showing, but just cut right along it. The next thing you're going to do is glue it onto your stabilizer. And you don't need to use too much glue here. The idea is you're going to be stitching this template on anyway, right? It's going to get all stitched right through, so it's not going anywhere. And the thing is, if you use too much glue, then when that glue dries on the back side, it hardens and makes like a thick kind of glue barrier that you then just have to work twice as hard to push your needle through, right? So you don't need to use too much, otherwise you'll find yourself trying to force that needle through your stabilizer, then dried glue, and then your paper, right? So don't need to go overkill on the glue here. Like I said, you're beating right through it, so template's not going anywhere. Just got to be on there enough that it doesn't slide around as you get started, right? So there it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of cut around this on the stabilizer. But the trick is always cut your stabilizer so that you have enough on the outside that you can hold on to it, right? See how I cut obviously a little bit too big, and I rounded my corners off so the thread is less likely to get stuck on the corners as you bead it. So something like that, because you can see now I can hold the stabilizer and then work on my template, right? So there we go. Next thing, we're going to quickly set up our thread, which does not take very long. It's a relatively straightforward setup. You take a wingspan, something like this for me, my open arm's worth of thread, which is typically the right amount. And, I've got long arms, so I end up with a long piece of thread, which is fine because it's my arms that are beading it, right? So however long your arms are, you'll get a strip that's the right length for you. Take one of your needles, right? Obviously, if you haven't threaded many needles in your day, a couple little tips, especially when you're using floss: straighten it out, flatten it out so that it's nice and crisp. Line it up, line the floss up vertically. It sort of has a flat side, and make that align with the vertical nature of the eye of the needle, and then literally just through it goes. I've done this so many times now I can get it first shot every try. Sometimes people have a hard time, especially maybe if your vision's kind of not so sharp. The main trick though is if you're trying and you fray the end of the thread, or the end of your floss, don't keep trying to put that through, you'll never get it. Take your scissors, snip, make a fresh end, straighten that out, and then try again, right? If that frays, snip a little piece off again. Always try with a fresh end of floss. You'll never be able to thread a frayed bit. It just won't go through. So next, right, the setup should be one short end, right, one short end, and then one long end. Your long end's about twice the length, maybe a little more than twice the length of your short end, okay? So you leave your short end open, untied, right? That just sits like that, as is. You only tie your long end. So you get to the tip of it, you do a surgeon's knot here. Once through, like a regular old knot, and then instead of pulling it tight and trying to make another knot onto it for like a double knot, you just go through again. You can even go through 3 times if you want, making a triple surgeon's knot, doesn't matter. But you can see now I've got 3 wraps around, right? I went 1, 2, 3. Haven't pulled it yet, right? 1, 2, 3. Now, when I pull my knot, you end up with a triple knot bang on in the same spot, right? There's my triple knot. No messing around trying to like line them up. That'll take you forever, and you'll never get them perfect, right? Whereas when you do a surgeon's knot, you'll get it perfect every time. Snip the little end off, so it's just a touch of a tail, don't need much. And then there you have it. Open end that's short, long end that's tied. This short end that's open is your safety net. This is your escape hatch, right? If you make a big mistake and you're like, uh-oh, what do I do? How do I reverse this? That's what you do. You can actually unthread your needle and then back up, take the beads off, get yourself sorted, then rethread your needle back onto the open end and then keep working, right? So that's your escape hatch if you get stuck, if something goes wrong, okay? So otherwise, that's that. We're ready to rock and roll. So stay tuned and we'll do our next beading technique. Okay, so time to get into it here. So you're going to need both your pink and your green out at the same time. So something that's really good is to rock something like a beading board. I lost a couple of them there. So you need a beading board here, right? So you can see this is what I've got. It's a piece of like thin little just wood that you just get at the dollar store kind of thing, and it's got like a felt on it. Just again, just like dollar store felt. It doesn't have to be fancy. And then what happens is the beads don't really roll on it, right? Which is nice. So you can scoop at them, they don't just roll off. So some people will put them on like the suede side of leather. Like if you have leather bits kicking around from like doing leather work, the suede side of leather will work, like the soft side. You could use even little dishes. Like if you have like a little shallow dish, you could put your beads in that. That way you could scoop them well, but it's up to you anyway. You'll want something to put them on. So I got both my colors out, pink and green, because we're going to need to interchange between them as we go here. So the way we're going to work this, I think, is we're going to be doing left to right and then right to left and just alternate back and forth up the whole project, right? So it's going to be like stack, like up, back and forth all the way up, almost like typewriter style. Okay, so we're going to be starting with our green. We'll be doing like a few green, however many it takes, 4, maybe 5. Then we'll switch to pink and then back to green. Then go up a level, green, pink, green, up a level, green, pink, green, just like that, back and forth, all the way up. It's easier than trying to see how all these triangles all converge up to the center here. Trying to get all those angular lines to meet at the top is going to be a nightmare. And it'll be a whole bunch of gaps all over the place, all those beads trying to meet together. We won't be able to get a sharp point with it. But if we go back and forth like this, when we get to the top, you just go like 3 beads, 2 beads, 1 bead, and that's your perfect point. And we just call it instead of trying to get all those lines together. Probably won't work very well on such a small piece especially. So let's do this, right? So we're going to start by grabbing some green, right? And what we can likely do here is probably we can almost just pick the right amount. Not quite enough. So I'll maybe do 3 and 3 here just to kind of show you what the scoop is. But you can pick like 3, 4, 5, or even 6 beads up at a time if you want to make gaps up. And this is all straight, there's no curves, which is kind of nice. You don't have to deal with beading curves. So we can put on like a reasonable amount of beads. But I'll start with 3 because it'll be easy to teach you this way. So you don't start with beads on. I just picked them up to show you and to count here. So what we're going to do is pop up right on the bottom corner of your template. So right on the corner. Okay, it's going to be hard a little bit. The corner might kind of bend up, but you want to get it so that you're right where that corner needs to be. Okay, so there I am. My corner got bent a little, but I know I'm right on track. I'm right on the right spot. Just getting sorted. It's important. setting these boundaries, right? You want to be right on the edge. Something like that. Okay, so now I can pull all the way through, right, from underneath, and here I am coming out right on this bottom corner, if you can see that. It's hard because I've got so much light coming through. Having windows is great, but not when you're trying to make videos. That might help a bit. So here we are, I'm coming out right on the corner. All right, so bottom corner. Now what I'm going to do is pick up my few beads. Let's say I grab 3. The process is the same no matter how many you pick up, so just be mindful of that. So I thread my 3 beads down the line, and you can see when I kind of hold them here, there they are. There's my 3 beads kind of in place, right? So there they are. I might autofocus or manual focus this a little bit so I can show you a bit better what's going on. Because this, as great as this camera is, it doesn't focus very well. So something like this. There it is. There's my 3 beads in line, right? So there they are on that line. So what I'm going to do now is right at the end of where those beads are, use one hand to steer them, the other hand to stitch, right? You use your thumb to hold them in place, right? So you can see I've got that being held there on the thread. I'm going to dip down right at the end of my 3rd bead, right on the line, so I know I'm straight. Pull my slack through. Now I've got 3 beads sitting there on the line. My final step is to pop up from underneath, right in between beads 1 and 2. So this can be a little difficult. Your template might be moving a little bit on you because you're right on the corner. But there I've got it. I popped up just in between beads 1 and 2. Right? We've got 1, 2, 3. So in between 1 and 2. Pull that slack through all the way. And then what I'm going to do is go through the eye, through the center of beads 2 and 3. Right, there we are. And then pull that slack through. Then you always do a little thumb roll, give a little roll and a tug on your thread, just so that you know those beads are on tight. Always give a little tug and a little thumb roll. Now they're locked in there, right on the line, right? Perfect. So now I'm going to pick up another handful of beads here, and I'm going to try and line it up so that I have just enough to make it to where my pink's going to be. So I can pick up some beads, check it out. It looks like 4 is going to make it. So I'll do 3 and then 4. Gives me 7 beads of green at the bottom, and that'll make it, I think, right to the line. Yeah, perfect. I'll show you that. You can see it makes it right to the black line, in which case I'm going to switch to pink next. Okay, so there it is. Same process, right? Go down from the top right at the end of the last bead, right at the end of my 4th bead. Pull my slack through. Now you can see there's my beads on the line, ending right where I need to change to pink. Perfect. Pop up between the 1st and 2nd bead that I put down right on the line. It's important to pop out right on the line because that way when you pull it tight, it doesn't, if you're off the line, that little loop that you did will drag them. You can use that trick to help make curves, so it's cool. You can stretch and bend your beads by popping up between bead 1 and 2 inside or outside your line to help them bend. But we want straight lines, right? This whole thing is going to be all geometrical, so you don't want to be off your lines. You want to be right on them. Through the center of my remaining 3 beads now, right? So I popped up between bead 1 and 2, went through 2, 3, 4, because I had 4 of them all together, right? So always pop up between 1 and 2, and then just shoot it through the rest of the beads, however many that is. Doesn't matter. If you pick up 10 beads, you go up between 1 and 2, and then you run out the rest of the 9, right? That's kind of how it goes. So there we are, tack down, ready to go. My thread is out the end of my last bead, ready to pick up some pink beads now, right? So I'm going to pick up pink. Now, especially because I do this quite a lot, I look at it, 6 pink beads is exactly the width. So I'm going to tack all 6 of these down in one shot. That way it just goes faster. And I know how to, make sure they're nice and tight. I won't have any gaps or anything like that. But you could do 3 and 3 if you're more comfortable with working with smaller amounts of beads. So again, lay them down, pop through, popping down right on the line at the end of the last bead. So at the end of my 6th bead, that way they all kind of come down. You can see here, there's my 6, right, on the line. And again, pop up between bead 1 and 2, up right on the line so it doesn't bow them or bend them. There we go. So it popped up between bead 1 and 2, and then now through the remainder. Right, so you can see I popped up between bead 1 and 2, and then I'm running out through my remaining 5. All right, so I give that a little pull. Boom. And again, little thumb roll, little tug, snug them up, don't have loose beads, jingle jangling around on your piece, right? There we go. There's my 6 pink in line. Now I know that I've got 7 green, so I'm going to do 7 green on the opposite side as well. That way it'll be perfectly symmetrical. Right, so 3 and 4, however you want to do it, right? You probably won't want to lay 7 down, that's probably too many. But there we go. I'm putting my 4 down first, again, right on the line. Pop up between 1 and 2. And then out the rest. I'm showing you a full line here just so you can see what this feels like. And then I'll show you how to actually step up to the next line, because you have to do a mini maneuver to go up to our next stack on the pyramid, essentially. So there we go. I'm putting my last 3 greens down now. Yep, and boom, it makes it exactly to the end of my triangle, which is perfect. I know that I did it just right because it ended exactly where it had to end. So we're perfectly symmetrical. This is going to look very sharp. Pop up between 1 and 2. And then through, always pop up between 1 and 2, and then out the rest, right? Boom. Okay, so there we have it. There's line 1, right? Green, pink, green. 7, 6, 7, right? 7 green, 6 pink, 7 green. Perfectly symmetrical. Now what we want to do to go up a level, because now we have to go back the other way, like typewriter style, right? So what we're going to do is you're going to plunge your needle through right at the end of the last bead you popped down, right? So right at the end of where I left off, right in line. So pop my needle down. And then what I'm going to do is come back up where my next little stack is going to be. So you want to leave yourself a bead width, right? Like you want to have enough space above your previous one, right? That they're not so smushed together that the beads are all curled. Like you don't want that. So here I am. I came up just probably not even a millimeter, probably less than a millimeter above, right? Half a bead width, essentially, because you have to picture 1/2 being below that up against the stack there. So I went up half a bead width. And now pull through. And now you're ready to go again, right? You're fresh and out. Now I'm going to pick up however many greens it's going to take to make it to the other side. Maybe, I had 7 in the previous one. Now I bet 6 will make it across, right? So I might be able to do 6 in one shot and speed bead this thing. Will it work? Yeah, pretty darn close. So I'm going to try 6 and see how that goes. Yep, 6 is looking pretty good. So I'm going to try 6. Right, and so just like that, we're going to work your way back and forth, stack after stack after stack, and it's going to make you essentially a pyramid, right? You're just stacking lines of beads, and then you just got to make sure to change to pink when you need to, then change back to green, and then go up a stack, right? And you're just going to work like that. So there you can see I just did 6 now, right? And there's my next stack. Then I'll do my pink, right, in the center, and then 6 green on the other side, right? Always mirroring. However many green you did, do the same amount of green on the opposite side. So it's even, right? You want it to be symmetrical. You can't do 6 green on one side and 5 on the other. Your whole triangle will start looking lopsided, right? So that's literally it. We're just going to go back and forth all the way up till we get to the very top. Then it'll be like 3 bead, 2 bead, 1 bead. That's our point. Call it. Then we'll put on our backing, then we'll edge it, then we'll put on the hardware. Okay, so I'm going to just bead this out, and then I'll show you what happens when we get to the very top. Then we can cut it out, manage it after that. Okay. I just also want to mention quickly that I just did a few layers, and as much as I'm sort of tapering in a little bit on the sides, dropping down 1 bead of green, in the middle, it's like because it's the width is so not quite a bead's width less at the start, it doesn't taper -1 bead each time necessarily. So I've kind of got like a similar amount in the middle. So you might see that depending on little tolerances in your beads too, you might look and you might be like, well, I can't actually drop down a bead on like green, pink, and green, or else I lose 3 bead widths, and it's just too much. So you might decide, well, I'll drop 1 each on the greens and then keep the same amount in the pink, or maybe drop 1 in the pink and then keep the same amount of green, and you'll see it'll create a taper effect as well. So you'll have to play with it. That's where the skill of the beading goes, is the guesswork, looking at it, being like, you know what, I'm going to keep this much, I'll drop these. There's a skill to creating those nice tapers and geometric shapes with round beads, right? It's kind of hard to do, but that's the skill, right? So just be mindful as you work on that. It won't be, -1 green each and -1 pink every level. Like, it's not going to do that. It'll be a little more subtle than that, right? So just play by eye. Okay, so here we have it. I've beaded all the way up. You can see, I've had to make some little decisions as I went, every once in a while you would have like almost the same amount of beads stacked over each other. You'd do like 3 green, 2 pink, 3 green, and then the one above it would actually have the same amount, just the way that it kind of sat. So you're really going to have to be intuitive. You're going to have to just kind of gauge it, and what happens is eventually you can start stringing them across in a row. Like on your needle, you can pick up like 3 green, or like maybe like 2 green, 2 pink, 2 green on the needle together in order, and then tack those all down across, and it's easier to kind of like center them and stuff like that. So you have the capacity to not have to alternate, stitch down 2 green, stitch down 1 pink, stitch down 2 green, like put those 5 on in order and then do them all in one shot, right? So you've got the capacity to do that. Now we're at the top here, where you can see I had, 2 green, a pink, 2 green, green, pink, green, 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 right? That's my taper up to the top. And then now I'm at the point where I've got to put my last bead. It's going to be a green bead. What we're going to do is we're going to do something a little bit special here, because we're going to make a loop with beads here, just a tiny little loop that sticks out off the top, and that's going to be where we attach our hardware, right? So our hardware is going to go on that. So stay tuned quickly in a sec here. I just need to grab the hardware to show you, but but that's going to be our next step, is to finish off the last bead, but also put the loop there to attach the hardware. We're going to do that now. Okay, folks, so we've had a distinct change of plans here. I was completely operating under the impression that we had the correct hardware for dangly earrings, and that's definitely not the case. So what we're going to have to do is make a little bit of an amendment here to the plan, because I don't have enough time to order in and then put off completing this project and making the videos prior to this being finished. So we got to just improvise and roll with it. So with that being said, we're going to do these post-back style, all right, because I do have all of the post-back hardware necessary. So with that being said, we don't need to do anything fancy on the top of this thing. We can just tack down our final green bead at the top to complete the pyramid, right, just the way we always do, like so. Just gonna go through and tack this in, get it done, and I can show you this is what it looks like all finished up. Right, and whenever you're finished, or whenever you need to also, like, if you need to splice in or replace your thread, do a new thread, always just leave yourself enough thread that you're not trying to make a knot with like an inch of thread. And then just in the back, right, you do the same thing where you make a double surgeon's knot like we did before, right, to set up our needle. Double surgeon's knot, it goes around 2 times, right, just like a normal overhand knot, but you do 2 of them. And then what you need to do is just triangulate your knot so that it snugs up right against the fabric. So I would do what we call, or what I call, I guess, the coat hanger kind of method, where essentially you're making like a tiny little coat hanger shape with your, index and thumb in one hand, splaying it open, then your other hand is pulling, and essentially those 3 points of contact triangulate your knot right down to the fabric. Okay, make a tiny coat hanger shape, and then all you do is you just pin that knot in place with your finger and then just pull the slack through, and it'll always be right on the spot, right where you need it. Clip off your excess, and that's it. So with that being said, there's our finished product here, right? And then the next thing we're going to do is cut this out, incorporate our post back in between the leather and this, so it's going to be an integrated kind of hardware. I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, so I'm going to cut this guy out, going to cut it right along as close as I can get, bearing in mind that there are stitches on the back, and if you cut too close and cut stitches, then the beads just come tumbling off and you have to start trying to restitch them in there, and then it becomes a nightmare because then you have free thread that can just loosen up and things can fall. So do not cut so close that you cut stitches. That's a no-no. So be careful, cut that out. We'll have our shape, and I'll show you how to put on your leather backing, integrate the hardware, and we'll be moving along. Okay, so to do your hardware, all right, what you need to do is start by getting your leather organized, right? So I've got my leather here. Set it up in such a way that's not wasteful, like you can get it right close to an edge. I could have mine like this, right? It's right along the edge. There's already kind of a corner. So lay it out in such a way that it makes sense, right? And then what we're going to do here actually is you're going to glue the and we're gluing it so the suede side, the soft fuzzy side, is inside the piece, so that what we'll be showing on the back is the smooth, shiny side. Okay, so shiny side out, suede side in. And what we're going to do is actually glue the bottom half of the leather on. So you can just put a little bit of glue. Right, for this you can be a little more liberal, and you can also use a strong glue here. You can use something tough. So get glue on the bottom half, really, at least. Maybe just over halfway, right, on the bottom of that. Then stick it on to your leather in a good way. Okay, so then what you're going to do, okay, is we're going to hang out, and I'm going to let that, I'm just putting something kind of heavy on it, just like a stack of business cards here, that'll hold it flat. I'm going to let that hang out for like 3-4 minutes or something like that until it really like kind of holds a bit, gets tacky. And then we're going to have a flap at the top that can flap open. That's going to let us set in our piece of hardware. Then we can glue around it, close it up, and trim our excess off. So that's what's going to be the next thing. So just hang tight for a few. Okay, so now you can see I've got my piece here. I'll trim a bit off just to make this easier for you to see. You can do your final trim after. I'm just going to have less to deal with in the picture here. Okay, so here it is. The bottom half is glued, or a little bit more than half. So there's like a flap at the top. See this little flap? That's what's going to let us. Put in our post back, right? Because the idea is it's going to get integrated inside like this. And then we're going to poke a hole in the leather, and it's going to get enclosed inside so that it's not just floating on the outside. It's built into the piece, right? It makes it a lot stronger that way. So what you need to do then, okay, is you kind of have to do this little game where you kind of center your post where you'd like it. Now I don't want it right at the tip, because then it's a little bit sketchy, right? There's not much strength around it. So I'm going to set mine back just a little bit. You don't want it too far back, or else then you have too much earring that hangs up onto your ear, which you don't want. So you got to play the game where you find kind of the right spot. Then you kind of hold it in place. And then you got to do this thing where you're kind of putting down your flap and kind of seeing like, okay, where's it going to meet roughly, right? And then you can take a pen and you can kind of do a little rough guesstimate mark there of about where your hole is going to need to be. So this is a little bit of a guessing game kind of thing. I've done a few of them, so I'm kind of getting better at it. But you might need to play with it, right? So now I've got a little dot here that's going to be roughly in the right spot. Leather stretches, so it'll move a little bit, so it's not a huge deal if it's not perfect. So then what you do is you take your needle, right? You take your beading needle, and you poke it through the leather on that dot, right? Then what I tend to do is I give it a couple little tugs in a couple different directions, being mindful of not damaging your needle. But you can just kind of move it around a little bit, give it a little swirl. All right, that just opens and stretches that leather out just a little bit more. Okay, I pull my needle out. Now what I can do is I can add a little bit of glue to the remainder of where my post is going to be. Put that right onto the stabilizer, like so. So that's in there. Then you take your post back and you place it in about the same spot where you had it before, because that's kind of where your hole is going to line up. And then you can proceed to actually lining up that hole and popping it through. So you might need to, because it's a bit of a tight thing, you might actually have to pop your hole through first and then get it in. I'm realizing that now. You got to find it, kind of move around, but it'll pop. It'll pop through that hole. There it goes. You hear a little click. Boom. It's through. Okay. Then you can kind of do your best to sort of center it, get it organized. But effectively, there it is, built in, right? Now all you see from the back is just a post. You don't see the rest of the hardware, right? Just like that. So now I can let that hang out for a little while and let the glue settle. Then I can trim off my excess, right? So trim it right flush to your stabilizer, and then we're ready to edge. Okay, so here it is. Here's what it looks like, cut out, done like that, right? So now our last step here really is to edge it. And once we do that, the piece is done. Well, one of them is done, then you have to make another one. That's the pain with earrings. So you take a stretch of thread, similar to how you would have done it previously, right? A wingspan of thread. And then for doing your edge work, you set up your needle in the exact same way, right? Short end is open, long end gets a double surgeon's knot once and twice through the loop, and then pull her tight. You get a double knot exactly in the same place. And then we just need to cut the slack off of this thing, or the extra, sorry. Something like that. Okay, so now our needle's set up, good to go. And then what you need to do to start this is you find a place on your piece where it didn't quite glue right to the edge. There's normally a spot where it doesn't really glue all the way to the edge. You get a little flap. So just feel around. Well, I did a pretty good job here of gluing this, almost too good. Oh, there we go. Okay, I've got a little spot here where you can see I can pull back the leather, right? It flaps back a little bit. So in that little spot where the leather comes back, I'm going to put my needle in on a really, get in there as deep as I can, right, far back, and then come out on a really shallow angle. That pops out just outside of the last bead of your outside bead. So I'm trying to get this through in a good way. There. Okay, you can see here I came through on a really intense angle, going in from underneath, deep inside the leather there, you know, just through the stabilizer, and then I popped out just outside the beadwork, right on the edge, just on the edge of the stabilizer on top of it. Okay, so now you can pull all your slack through, and then what you're going to end up with is the purpose of doing that is that it hides your knot, right? Now when I pull that flush, there's no knot there, right? The string just comes out of nowhere. Right, so that's how you hide that knot, right? It's a good little trick there. Now what we need to do is actually do this thing. We need to edge this. So what we'll do here is I'm going to quickly pour out some of my blue beads onto my beading board. Just do a little scoop here, and then I'll show you the edging technique. And once you get rolling on it, it just is what it is. You just repeat the same exact motion around and around and around the piece. Okay, so there's my blue beads on my board. Okay, so this edging happens one bead at a time, okay? So now that we're through here, I'm going to pick up one bead, okay, one bead. I can go all the way down, and you'll see where it kind of ends up sitting on the edge. Now, the idea here is to start it out. This is the toughest part, starting it, and there's something really important to think about. So you hold your earring so that the beads are facing you, right? You can see I'm holding it so the beads face me. You see the back. And what you want to do is edge according to, in the direction of, like, whatever hand your dominant hand is. So I'm a lefty. So I am going to bead, right? I'm going to edge clockwise so that my needle points clockwise around. Because if I try and bead counterclockwise, I'm doing this and trying to put it in backwards. It's a huge pain, right? So if I were a righty, I would have it in my right hand and I would bead counterclockwise. Okay, so if you're a righty, edge counterclockwise. If you're a lefty, edge clockwise. Huge tip. All right, so now what we need to do, okay, is the first bead's a little different. You have to set it in place, and then there's one kind of motion after that. So because I'm going clockwise, I'm actually going to come in just behind this bead. So now that I have it sitting right on the edge, I'm going to go in through the leather and the stabilizer just behind it. So I've come up just behind that bead, right? It's behind it because I'm actually going this way, right? So now I can pull all my slack through. Oh yeah, and this is when, if you have a little pair of needle nose pliers, or especially beading pliers, if they have a round tip, you can get those at like Michael's or even some dollar stores, or Walmart carries them. It's nice to pull through the leather. Now that we've got leather there, it helps. So pull all that through, and now you'll see I've got a bead just kind of sitting there, stitched into place. But now what I need to do is set this up so that I can move forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that bead. Right? I'm going to go through the back of it in the direction that I'm beading. Like for me, I'm going clockwise, so I'm going in the back of it and lining the bead up so that it'll be facing clockwise. Right? So now I can pull my slack through here, give it a little tug, right? Snug that up. And now we're ready to really start edging because I have the thread coming out the center of that first bead now, right? It's out of the middle, it's ready to go. Now I can start actually doing this. So I pick up another bead, right, one at a time, pick up a bead, and then what I'm going to do is now we're going to be going through the top, just in front of the bead we put down, just in front of it. You go in through the stabilizer, and you pop out. You just want to go in on a very slight angle so that you actually get some meat on your leather, right? You can see I've got a bit of leather. I'm in maybe about 1.5 millimeters or something like that from the edge. Pull that through. Now my bead's sitting there. See, it's sitting all crooked beside it, right? It's not looking very hot. So what I need to do now is finish the stitch, where I go through the back of the bead, just like I did before. You can see here, we're going through the back of it, always working in the direction, right? Like you go in the back of the bead, orient it. You might need to grab your needle and kind of like flip the bead to get it straight, and then through the back of it, going clockwise for me, right? Because I'm a lefty. You're probably a righty, so you're probably going to be counterclockwise. And there it is. Now I've got two of them side by side. The more you put down, the stronger it gets because they kind of leverage off each other. So again, just in front of that one, through the stabilizer on a light angle, so I get a bit of meat through my, you can see there's a little bit of an angle on my entry point there, so I get a bit of leather. Right, because we're effectively seaming this up, or stitching it, by using a bead to hide the seam, right? So it's a clever little way of doing that. Then again, through the back of the bead in the direction that I'm beading this way. Pull all my slack through. Always give it a little tug, snuggle it around there so that it kind of firms up. There now is 3 of them in a row. And I'm just going to keep going all the way around. Nothing changes now. Pick up a bead, put it in just in front of the bead you had just laid, going through the stabilizer out the back, and then come back around through the bead in whatever direction you're beading, and just keep doing that over and over, one bead at a time. Once you get good and get fast, it actually kind of flies and you'll zoom around, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get most of the way and I'll show you what it looks like, okay? Okay, so here we are. I'm going to show you right at the end of our edging process. So here we are. That's what it looks like, totally edged. Right? I'm just going to show you how to finish it off, okay? So you can see the gap for one bead left on my final bead, okay? And we'll see they all have slightly different inner diameters, but there's a great way to finish this off that really like solidifies your piece. So I'm going to take one last bead, just like I normally would, right? I'm going to fill that little gap. And I'm just going to, go through right in that little opening, doing the same, slight angle into the meat, just the way I always would, right? Just like I've stitched the rest of this. Pull it through. There's my bead sitting where it kind of needs to sit roughly, right? A little bit crooked because I haven't gone through it yet. What we're going to try and do here is go not only just through this last bead, right, like you normally would, but I'm going to actually try and go through my first bead too, the one that is right next to it, right, the very first one I put down. So I'm going to see if I can go through both of them. If you can, it's nice. It's a great way to finish off your piece because then you kind of tie your last and first bead together. It seams the two ends up and makes it, you know, there's no break or gap in that process, right? So we'll see if it goes through. It doesn't always. Sometimes it's a bit too tight and it won't fit through again, and that's fine. We'll see if it goes. I don't want to break the bead, but I'm going to try. Yep, it went through. So there we go. So we know these blue beads are reasonable on their width. So now what I've done is I've gone through my first and last bead together. They're now stitched together. They're attached. So now it's a perfectly fluid circle all the way around, completely stitched in a circle. Now all I got to do is get rid of, like kind of tie it off, right? Now the trick I'm going to say is, you know, I would start my edging near the top here, because what I'm going to do now is I need to kind of hide my stitch a little bit, or my knot, because I'm going to have to obviously tie off this knot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it on an angle over to the near the post back, because there's already something going on there. So I'm going to work it through, and you'll see I'm going to get it so that it pops up right beside it. That way it'll look like it's kind of all just one thing. Right? I'm just finding the right spot here. You'll kind of see what this looks like. Something like this. So you can see I've come through on an angle, right? I'm done my stitches, so I went through on a steep angle to put it right over and pop out in the back here near the post. You don't want it right up against the post because you don't want the knot right there, right? Because obviously that's gonna sit against your ear, so you don't want the knot sitting against your ear necessarily, right? But I'm just gonna do it like this, pull through. Sometimes for these long ones where you go through a lot of material, it's nice to have a little pair of pliers. But essentially, there we go. Now my thread's sticking out the back, right? Then all you do is just tie it off, right? Like we always do. Double surgeon's knot, 1, 2 times around to make my little loop, right? And then, of course, I do my little coat hanger move, right? You bring it in, bring it in. Just getting it set up so you can see it. Making my little coat hanger, right? Looks like a little coat hanger shape. And then once you kind of have it there, you put your fingernail on the string, on the knot, and pull it. And then your knot is right there. Right flush. It's right against that material. Then I can trim off my excess. Let's need my scissors. Trim off your excess. Pretty darn close. And then there you have it. The only evidence of any type of work on here is that tiny knot in the back, right? From the front, absolutely no signs of work. On the back, the leather covers all of your work, and the post is integrated, so there's no like glue or stitching or anything going there. It's markless. All we have is one tiny little knot right up here, and the thing is it's close enough to the post that when you wear that in your ear, it'll likely be hidden, right, by the bottom of your earlobe, right? So from anybody looking at it, your earlobe will be up here, the bottom will be completely flawless, not a single mark there, right? And your tiny little knot will be covered by your ear when you're wearing it. So otherwise, that's it. There it is. And then of course, you got to make another one. That's the idea with earrings, is then you got to make two of them. But your second one's always going to be better because you've got, you know, more chance to kind of practice and work on it. You'll have made mistakes that you won't remake, and you'll learn new things. But there it is. There's the piece done, right? Our two green strips representing that green, vibrant, new kind of life. Our pink center representing that emerging blooms of flowers, right? And then surrounded by a nice sky blue, because it's the beautiful summer days are on their way, right? So a very seasonally representative springy piece, right? That you can wear all through spring and summer. So there it is. That's it. Thanks for joining in, and I hope you enjoy this. Good luck on your pieces, and that's it.